that are on us in this agreement, in this partnership in government. Often, I was just reflecting last week, often at the end of the night, after the house rises, when there's no one else around, I can peek around the corner into James's office and we can sit down and just spend a little bit of extra time reflecting with each other, supporting each other, giving each other the emotional strength and recognising exactly how gut-busting this work is, recognising how hard we are having to work every single day to get stuff done, to uphold our green kaupapa. I have been so thankful for having him as my friend, to be able to go to at the end of the day, there might be a glass of wine involved, to be able to sit down and just download what has been happening and feel the support in each of our areas of work and our collective care for our party. That needs to happen. Wahine mā, tāne mā, rangatira mā, tēnā koutou. It is my absolute pleasure. Can we please welcome my friend, my co-leader colleague, James Shaw.
Hei Māori ora. Kia ora. He mihi nui ki te mana whenua o te rohi nei. Ngā hapu o nai tahu, tēnā koutou. Kia koutou, te whānau o te Pāti Kākāriki. Kua hui hui mai nei. Ko tēne te mihi, kia koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I want to take you back to the Green Party AGM in 2016. For those of you who were there, you might remember it was at Lincoln, near Canterbury. We had just recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the Labour Party to change the government. And 18 months later, we did. You did. Now, at that AGM, I talked about a possible future. It was a future where, on your weekends away, you could go to sleep each night, safe in the knowledge that the beach you were enjoying that day will still be there for future generations, unthreatened by rising seas. In the morning, you'll be awoken by the dawn chorus from flocks of birds that once bordered on extinction. In the morning, you'll pack your family into your electric car and travel safely home on uncongested roads while your kids count the containers on the freight trains running on the tracks alongside you. If you've got time on your way home, you might actually stop by a river and swim in it, because you can. And on Monday morning in New Zealand, you'll catch the light rail into town for a day of meaningful work at a social enterprise or a clean tech startup, making the world just a little bit better. And while you're at it, earning a fair day's pay. When you're done, you'll go home to your warm, dry home, a place that you can call your own, secure in the knowledge that at the end of the month you've got enough to pay for the rent or the mortgage and still have enough left over to put plenty of food on the table. I said then that that is the country that I want to live in. That is the future that I am committed to. It's just a better world, and it is entirely possible. Now, the reason I wanted to take you back to that 2016 speech at that AGM is because 18 months after we changed the government, we have actually started to make that world a reality. We are reducing the threat of rising seas by getting climate pollution under control with the zero carbon bill. We have banned new fossil fuel exploration in our waters because we all know that we cannot burn the fossil fuels that have already been found. Eugenie, it's real dark in here. Eugenie is bringing back the Dawn Chorus with the largest injection of new funding into the Department of Conservation since the agency was created. Julianne is making it possible for families to be able to afford electric cars. She's making it more convenient to catch public transport, safer to go cycling around our cities, and she's unclogging our highways with huge new investments in rail freight. Our government has a huge plan to clean up our rivers so that you actually can go swimming in them again. We're boosting new clean technologies and the low carbon economy with the Green Investment Fund. We're lifting the minimum wage year after year so that you can actually earn a fair day's pay. Jan Logie is making... Jan is making our homes and our communities safer with some world-leading solutions into one of our country's greatest disgraces, domestic and sexual violence. We've reformed the Residential Tenancies Act so that every family can have a warm, dry home. This year's budget alone put $6 billion of new funding into Green Party confidence and supply initiatives. And we are just getting started. I don't know if you were at that 2016 AGM or not, but I have to say at that point, it wasn't clear if anyone in the media or anyone else for that matter actually thought that we could change the government. And then when we did change the government, I don't think that we imagined just how much we would be able to achieve in our first 18 months. After all, we'd never actually been in government before. But we did dare to dream that a better world was entirely possible. And that brings me to my point today. We have to strengthen our resolve and strengthen our hope, because while a better world is entirely possible, it is far from certain. And we have to do a lot more, we have to make a lot more progress than we have so far. Because when it comes to the greatest challenge of all time, the climate crisis, I have to say, the news from around the world in the last 18 months has gotten worse rather than better. Small steps are proving to be big battles. And they're battles because, believe it or not, we are still fighting climate denial. Now, it's not the climate denial of old. You know, global warming is caused by sunspots or volcanoes or aliens. Climate change is a United Nations conspiracy involving every single scientist in the world somehow. You know, we've moved on from that kind of thing. The new climate denialism is actually far more dangerous. And it's dangerous because it doesn't actually deny the existence of climate change or the science behind it. It's dangerous because it sounds reasonable. So the first stage of climate denial is it's not happening. Second stage of climate denial is it's not us. Third stage is, well, if it is us, it can't be that bad. And the fourth stage is, well, if it is that bad, then there's nothing we can do about it, and we shouldn't try. Now, think about some of the things that you've heard some politicians say recently. A climate emergency is nothing more than political posturing and virtue signaling. It's not a climate emergency today. It's just something we need to work through. Does that sound familiar? Those are the soothing words of the former Associate Climate Change Minister, Simon Bridges, and his colleagues. Words designed to lull us into a false sense of security that climate change isn't really that big a deal, and we don't really need to do anything different. Don't need to make low-emission vehicles cheaper and more affordable. Don't need to stop offshore oil and gas exploration. Don't need to reduce agricultural emissions by all that much. It's also reasonable. It's also dangerous. Yeah, climate change is real. Yeah, it's us. But, it's okay. We can fix it without really changing anything. Don't worry about it. We've got this. So reasonable. So dangerous. And the truth is, the politicians and their allies, who are the new climate deniers, are driven by something even more dangerous. Short-term, calculated self-interest. The politicians think that it's good for their polling. Their allies think that they'll be able to delay action until a new government comes along and kicks the can even further down the road. But they are wrong about all of this. I believe that the gravest danger that we face right now is the narrative that has been spun by Simon Bridges and others that we don't need to change anything about the way that we're doing things, that it's no big deal, that 0.5% more of economic growth is actually a greater concern than staving off epic droughts or rising seas. And that making any changes at all to business as usual would somehow destroy the economy and society as we know it. Now, when Chloe Swarbrick stood up in Parliament, wait till you hear about her. When Chloe Swarbrick stood up in Parliament to declare a climate emergency, the opposition simply blocked it. That is the new climate denial. That we don't need to change how we do things in order to avoid a climate crisis. It is desperate and it is dangerous. Well, Simon, it's time for a bit of truth-telling, don't you think? Climate change is real. It is us. It is bad. Really bad. Since 1980, the world has experienced a 50-fold increase in the number of dangerous heat waves. The United Nations estimates that by 2050 the world will need twice as much food as it does today. But drought is turning some of our most arable land into desert. The Arctic is on fire right now while we're having this conversation. The Arctic on fire. But that picture behind me, that's the Port Hills in Christchurch. We're already seeing a 25 to 30% increase in Category 4 and 5 hurricanes. If we let our planet warm, as we keep doing, we'll lose about 70% of the coral reefs due to ocean acidification. Reefs which support about a quarter of all marine life that 500 million people depend on as their food source. If we keep changing the climate with our actions, there's about a 1 in 2 chance that we will cut economic output around the world by about 20% this century. Now, for the sake of comparison, the Great Depression of the 1920s and 1930s cut economic output by about 15%. The GFC, the Great Recession of the last decade, cut economic output around the world by about 2%. The climate crisis, it could be as much as 20%. So think about that. It's fewer jobs, it's lower wages, it's less food to eat. But the new climate deniers, what they won't admit is that that is the future that they are pushing us towards. They still don't seem to have realised that the economy and the society happen inside the environment. Jobs happen on the planet. Prosperity happens on the planet. Calling this a crisis, calling this an emergency, isn't alarmism. It's a description. It's a statement of fact. To suggest, in fact, that this isn't a crisis, that it's not an emergency, is at best uninformed, and at worst, it is misleading. Well, I have bad news for the new climate deniers. Climate change is real. It is us. It is bad. And here's the good news. We can fix it. Yeah. We can. Because the disasters and the denial are not all that we're seeing, is it? In the face of all of this, something else is stirring. There's a hunger for change, a movement for hope. Around the world, school students are striking. Woo! They're putting down their books and they're asking why the adults who claim to be looking after their interests are letting them down so badly. They're marching in the streets and demanding action for their futures. They're telling us that we have to change. So when I stepped out in front of these students, in front of Parliament, thousands and thousands of them, I was moved. I was inspired. Because make no mistake, these students, our rangatahi, are an inspiration. They are the common decency of humankind. In a very real way, they are the hope and the inspiration for the future that we need right now. And we, the Greens, must be their voice in Parliament and in government. So yes, we need to tell the truth about the coming climate crisis and what we need to do right now to avoid it. But we cannot allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by fear and despair. All that does is to bring about hopelessness and helplessness and powerlessness and inaction. And we cannot afford that right now. The new climate deniers are using fear to their advantage. Everything that Simon Bridges is doing right now is about spreading fear and misinformation. Fear of change, fear of uncertainty, fear it might cost you a bit of money. He figures it worked for Trump, it worked for Brexit, it worked in Australia, he figures it'll work here too. But we have a different story to tell. Our job is to imagine the future that we want to see. And you know what? We are. We're making it happen. We know there's a climate emergency. And we have a plan to deal with it. So today, I'm announcing Aotearoa New Zealand's very first cross-government climate action plan. This is a massive work program right across the government that is going to run for many years. And it will lead to fundamental changes to how we get around our cities, how we heat our homes, how we farm, how we dispose of our waste. Now, some of you who pay attention to this kind of thing, guests, which told us sort of how we should be moving towards a low emissions economy. It contained sections. It told government is moving to implement or further develop almost all of the recommendations. Some of those recommendations that we're getting started, like establishing a green investment fund to shift investment into the new economy, into low carbon technologies, like scrutinising all new legislation with a climate impact statement so that all ministers need to consider climate change in everything that they do. We'll be passing the Zero Carbon Act and establishing an independent climate change commission. Work is underway to ensure that large organisations are reporting on their climate risks, because as the great climate activist Bill McKibben once said, you can have a healthy fossil fuel balance sheet or you can have a relatively healthy planet. I know which one I choose. The government's proposed clean car discount will reduce the price of electric and fuel-efficient cars, both new and second-hand, and thanks to the work that Julianne Genter is doing with our colleagues across the government, we'll have shifted billions of dollars of investment away from surprisingly short but exceedingly expensive motorways and more frequent and convenient buses and trains. To clean up our electricity system, Gareth Hughes is making sure that the urgency of climate change underpins an ambitious new renewable energy strategy. We have so much potential here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, for more wind, more solar, geothermal and hydro. There is really no reason to be digging up the dirty stuff and burning it. We're in Dunedin. I want to give a shout out to the folks from Blueskin Bay, including Scott Willis. Where are you, Scott? Scott and the team from Blueskin Bay have had a sustained effort to help us understand how we can get the benefits of more wind power, and that is beginning to pay off, finally, around the cabinet table. So well done. Aotearoa's biggest industrial coal users are starting to move towards clean alternatives. We're phasing out the free allocation for big polluters under the emissions trading scheme to make it cost effective for them to upgrade to clean technology. And our government is working on a plan that will hopefully end the use of coal in public buildings like schools and hospitals. In the near future, the only place where your kids will see coal is in a museum. Changing to clean energy sources isn't enough if the buildings that we use that energy in aren't using it efficiently. So I'm delighted that in the upcoming work to review the building code, the government will be looking at how homes and buildings can help to fix the climate crisis instead of making it worse. And I'm looking forward tomorrow to hearing a little bit more about the homes of the not too distant future from our co-leader, Marama Davidson. And of course, somewhat famously, we are going to move to price and reduce agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, because we all have a part to play, and agricultural emissions do make up almost half of our total. And farming leaders are, for the most part, on board. And I cannot state how significant that is. That is a huge deal. Appropriate decision making is always been part of the Green Party Charter, and it means that the principle is that the most affected by a decision need to be at the table and in the room when that decision is made. That principle has driven our efforts to bring farming sector leaders to the table on agricultural emissions pricing, and it has worked. Yeah. could be more. And yes, it could be faster. But without the Greens, it would also be less. And it would also be slower. Or nothing at all. For the first time ever, there is agreement that that has to happen. Now, we also know that the transition to the low-carbon economy, for it to work, it has to be a just transition. And that kaupapa, that the transition must be urgent and it must be rapid, because we know that the consequences for working people and families on low incomes will hit them more than people who can afford to move further up the hill and away from rising seas. So that would not be just. And that is hugely important to the Green Party's work in climate change. And I do want to acknowledge our workplace relations and welfare spokesperson, Jan Logie, for her work in this area. Jan is working to ensure that everyone, particularly families on low incomes, have the resources to live sustainably as we transition our economy. This is about debunking one of the main myths about climate action, and that myth is that climate action is unaffordable for ordinary people. The new climate deniers who say that action to reduce emissions is just a cost with no economic benefit, they could not be more wrong. The low emissions economy of the future is more productive, it's more innovative, and it's better paid than the one of today. Now, local solutions to global problems has also been a long-standing mantra within the Green Party. So, from the local to the global. Our government is now moving to integrate its international trade strategy with its international climate change strategy. In the past, our trade deals have run counter to our agreements and our responsibilities on the environment and climate change, and we're bringing them together. And I acknowledge the leadership of Golri's government on who's doing this work. None of this would be happening without the Greens at the heart of government driving change from the core. The Minister of State Services is writing to the State Services Commissioner to make sure that the public service is focused on the work that needs to be done in our climate action plan. The chief executives of the ministries that are most involved in this, Transport, MD, Ministry for the Environment, Treasury, and so on, together sit on a board that I'll be meeting with regularly to track progress against the plan. With this cross-government climate action plan, you can see that the government, with the Greens at the core, at the heart, always pushing for more, always pushing for faster, this government is working to reduce emissions right across our economy from every sector in our society. We are building a country where everyone has enough to live good lives within what the planet can provide. The new climate deniers may be loud, they may be trying to scare us and to hold us back as a country or as a planet, but they are losing. You know, as most New Zealanders know, that we do face a climate crisis, and we do not buy the desperate and dangerous message of denial, and we will not be petrified by fear. We all know that we can fix this. By the end of this term of government, just 36 months in length, we will have done more to stave off the climate crisis than the sum total of all previous governments for the last 30 years combined. And it is happening because of the work that you have done over the years to bring the Green Party to this point. Have we done enough? No, not even close. There is so much more to do. But we have done all of this, whether it's Stopping offshore oil and gas exploration, or $14 billion in investment for clean transport. We have done all of this with just 8 members of Parliament. Imagine what we could do with just a few more.